This brings up one other very, very important thing in this journey, and that is mothers, as I've said, biologically, psychologically, spiritually, although spiritual is a word I want to be careful with, but I also don't want to leave out of the picture because at the very least, the universe is massive, and you'd better stay attentive to that. And the molecular universe is also massive, so let's stay open to all of that. But the mother is profoundly important. But there is the temptation to demonize the mother for, oh, my mother did this wrong, my mother did that wrong. The deeper you get into this work, the more that goes away. Mm. The more you also begin to see where your mother was brave, where your mother, or I can take my mother as an example, an alcoholic, had drug problems. I began to see her family and where she came from, and also being a woman after World War II, and a husband who had PTSD, and all these things, was profoundly brave, even as she was massively damaging. Not because she wanted to be. She didn't have any understanding. And these women in the past who've caused so much damage for whatever reason, so much of it not their fault, and some of it their fault, were trying generally to do the best they could do. And they need to be celebrated, and they need to be honored. And as we go deeper into the psychological, spiritual, and biological damage that was done, we need to still stay attentive to a sense of gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important. A man whose work I follow pretty deeply is Mark Wolin. He works with family constellation and inherited family trauma. And one of the things that he talks about is that you're never going to heal as long as you hold on to a victim narrative where your parent was your aggressor, and that the healing comes when you can acknowledge the things that they did, both good and bad, the things that they didn't do, both good and bad, in equal acknowledgement. That to recognize that, yeah, there was a lot of love that they didn't give, but they didn't give that because they couldn't give that. Yeah. And what they could give, they gave as much as they could. And so to be able to acknowledge that, yeah, they made a lot of mistakes and messed me up, and yeah, they did a lot to make sure that I was as loved as they were able of loving me, and that where they damaged me was not their fault. Like, they're not actually to blame. They were grappling with stuff just as I'm grappling with stuff. They made mistakes that injured me just like I've made mistakes that have injured others. And that if you look at the complexity of dynamics that contributes to the trauma of just one person, it's quick. It gets to a point where you have to acknowledge that really no one's to blame. Every individual person is responsible for their actions. But when it comes to trauma, there isn't a particular person to blame for it. I mean, developmental trauma, maybe they might get.
I think the one thing I know Mark, and I'm very, very fond of Mark. I mean, I think, I think he brings a tremendous amount to this narrative. But as a father and a grandfather, I think there's a very, very important place to communicate with one's children and one's grandchildren about what we did wrong. Mm-hmm. It's very helpful when you have a parent or we have some witnesses who can say, yes, that's what happened. Yes, that's what happened. I made a mistake. Why did I make the mistake? I mean, what is it? Is it mistake? What's the word? Sin. It comes from the Greek.
To miss the mark.
To miss the mark.
Yeah.
And that's basically, the mistake is the same thing. It's a mistake. It's like you go, it's critical for us to go back and say, confirm, this is what happened. I was there at your birth. I remember your birth. I have details about it if they want to know. I mean, if they don't want to know, they'll come to you when they're ready. But I think that we are at fault. That's part of what the previous generation. That's where the part where you go, okay, so a woman is pregnant. One of the jobs of the parents, and if the grandparents would be the great grandparents, whatever, if they can share with that pregnant mother when she's ready what they know, what they did wrong, because what they did wrong may repeat itself in her pregnancy if we don't clean it up.